Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into something absolutely fascinating, the architecture of the human mind. We'll be unpacking a profoundly insightful manifesto known simply as the Atrium. Now I want you to picture something for just a second. Imagine your inner life is an actual physical building. The wild thing is, most of us wander around inside ourselves completely blind to the structure we're living in. We bump into walls, we get stuck, and we desperately need a central space of awareness. Well, that's exactly what this explainer is going to give you, the blueprint to build that space. Let's get into it.
Right off the bat, I want to ask you a question. What would it actually mean if you were literally built like a house, but you kept getting trapped inside the burning rooms of your own emotions? You know, like when you can't find the exit because you're too busy being the fire? It's a crazy thought, right? But that's exactly the problem this whole manifesto tackles. The atrium is the solution. It's the place from which you can finally see yourself.
So, here's our architectural tour for today. We'll look at the house that you are, define what the atrium is, and map out your complete architecture. Then we'll explore the interval of freedom, learn how to build your atrium, and finally, master the art of returning.
All right, Section 1. The house that you are. You are an architecture. It's super important to grasp this right away. Viewing a human being as a building. It isn't just a pretty poetic metaphor. According to the source material, it's a structural reality. You are quite literally made of floors, resting on one another, carrying each other's weight.
It's actually mind-blowing how perfectly our human elements map onto architectural ones. Think about it. Your body, that acts as the foundation. It registers absolutely everything before you even have a conscious thought. Your emotions are the plumbing. They flow through every wall, warming up or totally freezing a room. Your ego is the load-bearing wall holding the whole shebang up, while your soul is the original underlying blueprint. Then you have your relationships acting as the doors and windows, and your environment is the literal ground you stand on. It's all connected.
But here's the huge danger of living in this house without a central viewing point. As the text says, knowledge without position is just a collection. It's not architecture. You can read literally all the self-help books in the world, but without a specific place to stand and observe your own structure, you just become the burning emotion or the defensive ego. You end up reacting completely on autopilot instead of actually observing the system at work.
Which brings us right to Section 2. What is the atrium? The open space in the middle. So, let's define this clearly. In classical architecture, an atrium isn't a kitchen. It's not a bedroom, right? It doesn't have a specific utilitarian function. It's really just an open, central space that lets the light in and gives you a clear view of everything around it. Internally, your atrium is exactly that. It's not some hidden seventh room of your personality. It is the empty, light-filled space exactly between your inner rooms. It's the position from which you can see the whole structure and observe yourself without actually merging with the emotion.
It's absolutely crucial to understand what the atrium is, and maybe more importantly, what it isn't. We need to bust some massive mindfulness myths right here. The atrium is not a control room where you forcefully manage your feelings like some sort of bunker operator. It's not an ivory tower where you just dissociate from real life, and it's for sure not a demand for permanent numb serenity. What it is a space of true awareness. Look, having an open roof doesn't stop the rain. It lets the weather in. The game changer is that you're letting the storm in while simply watching it fall, instead of being the storm yourself.
Moving along to Section 3, the complete architecture, nexus, interface, and atrium. Let's look at the structural blueprint of this whole philosophy to see how the building actually functions together. The manifesto breaks this down into this kind of holy trinity of inner design. First, you've got the coherent nexus. These are your inner connections. Basically, how your body, mind, and soul relate to each other without constantly fighting. Second, you have the interface. This is your outer facade, the way you actually make contact with the outside world. And third, the atrium, the open core that sees both of them. You absolutely need the atrium, because without it, your inner nexus is totally blind, and your outer interface is just running like an unconscious machine. The atrium is what brings actual awareness to the entire building.
And that brings us beautifully to Section 4, the interval of freedom. The space between stimulus and identification. Here, we're shifting from the physical blueprint to how this architecture actually functions in real time, focusing on what the manifesto calls the interval.
The manifesto illustrates the core dynamic of human consciousness so brilliantly here. It says, between stimulus and identification lies a space. In that space lives your freedom. We're talking about a tiny, tiny gap here. Sometimes it's literally just a half-second space between feeling an impulse and identifying with it. If you don't have that interval, you have zero choice. The trigger instantly becomes the reaction. But inside that tiny space, that is where your atrium exists. It grants us the incredible choice to not be immediately occupied by our impulses.
Let's look at a super practical example to make this concrete. Imagine two people saying the exact same word, no. On the outside, the action is 100% identical, but internally, one no might be spoken from a place of deep fear or some old wound, so it's acting as a defensive wall. But the other no could be spoken from the clarity of the atrium, acting as a healthy, clear boundary. The outside looks exactly the same, but the inner density and the origin of that action are completely different, all depending on where you're standing in your inner house.
You've got to consider this core principle. What is seen transforms. What is not seen repeats. If you lack that inner observation, honestly, changing jobs, changing partners, or moving to a new city is just a set change, a decor change as the text puts it. You're just putting up fresh wallpaper over the same unseen wounds. True transformation requires actually seeing your ego from the atrium. And notice I said seeing it, not demolishing it. Remember, the ego is a load-bearing wall. If you take a sledgehammer to it, the whole house collapses. You just have to stop making it the center of the room.
Okay, so we've seen the theory. Now, how do we actually pull this off? Let's move to Section 5, Building Your Atrium. The 4 principles of daily construction. We really need these because, let's be real, the atrium isn't built in some perfectly quiet, peaceful study room. It's built in the messy friction of real, everyday life.
Let's walk through how this builds step by step. First up, the breath as a threshold. Right before you react, take one conscious breath. It acts as the literal architectural threshold between a burning room and your open atrium. Second, the origin question. When you feel a really strong emotion hit, just ask, where is this coming from? Is it coming from a wound or is it coming from the truth? Third, distinction without separation. This is learning to recognize your anger without actually becoming the anger. And finally, fourth, the daily return. At the end of every day, simply ask yourself where you left your atrium and how you managed to return to it. It's not about feeling guilty. It's just basic daily maintenance.
And speaking of returning, that leads perfectly into our final section, 6, the art of returning, knowing how to return. Now I want to bring some comfort and resolution here because we have to address an inevitable truth. You are going to fall out of the atrium. In fact, you'll probably fall out of it later today.
But here's the thing. The atrium is not about never falling. It's knowing how to return. Think about it. If success meant never getting angry or never contradicting yourself, literally nobody could live in this house. Getting caught up in an emotion isn't a failure. It's just part of the human condition. The true practice, the actual heavy lifting of building this space, is simply the act of returning to the observation space after you've lost it. Every single time you return, you strengthen the floor.
The manifesto shares this absolutely brilliant analogy from aviation. It says, pilots know this principle. Trust the instrument, not the sensation. When they're flying through heavy clouds, a pilot's body might swear they are flying straight and level, when in reality, they're in a dangerous dive. They are strictly taught to trust their instruments over their feelings. Your atrium is your inner instrument. When your feelings completely disorient you, the atrium is your required, reliable reference point. So, to wrap up our core explanation, here is the architect's true promise: an open space in the middle of your existence. Look, the promise is absolutely not a life without storms. Anyone trying to sell you a life without storms is just selling you anesthesia wrapped up as enlightenment. The real promise? A permanent place inside yourself where every storm can be safely observed. A place where the light falls on everything you are.
And that brings us right to the manifesto's powerful closing statement. It's your life. Take the next step. From the atrium. I absolutely love this because it's such a great reminder that your house is already built. The foundation is there. The rooms are there. You don't need to completely demolish yourself and start over. You just need to step into the middle, look up, and let the light in. As we close out this explainer, I want to leave you with one final provocative question to carry with you today. Where did you return to your atrium today? Take a little time to really look at your own inner architecture, find your center, and just enjoy the space. Thanks for hanging out with me.